beyond its boundaries. Our change will lead to better lives for all. New Lotte, the power of a better world. New today, better tomorrow. Lotte.
Coming up on Arirang News. Excitement is building ahead of President Yoon Suk-yeol heading to Camp David for what is the first ever standalone summit between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. That's to be held in the coming hours, where the leaders are likely to ramp up trilateral cooperation. During the trilateral summit, the leaders will also look to deal with supply chain disruptions, mainly on chips and other high technology, and are likely to establish so-called early warning systems. China's property giant Evergrande files for bankruptcy protection in the U.S., leading to a deepening real estate crisis in the country, of worsening economic woes with discouraging data coming out of Beijing. Good evening. It's 9 p.m. here in Seoul. Thank you for joining us on Arirang News. President Yoon Suk-yeol will attend a historic summit with his U.S. and Japanese counterparts at the U.S. presidential resort of Camp David as the three leaders seek to take trilateral cooperation to a new level in key areas, including in security and economic issues. Our presidential correspondent, Woo Soo-young, standing by very close to the summit venue in Maryland. We connect with her now. So, Soo-young, it's the morning of the unprecedented summit. Excitement is building here in the nation. So what's the atmosphere like there around Camp David?
A very good evening to you, Chiyoung. It is still rather early here in the morning, but we're still feeling the excitement already just about 3 kilometers away, a stone's throw away from the Camp David venue. Soon, President Yoon will arrive at Camp David on a U.S. military for the much-anticipated summit with President Joe Biden and Prime Minister Fumio Kishida, amid the lush green scenery and the sound of birdsong. There's understandably a great level of excitement, as it's the first time ever that the leaders of the three countries are holding a standalone summit. It's a true testament to how relations between South Korea and Japan have really improved dramatically since March this year, fully restoring their trade and intel sharing arrangements ever since. Yoon's set to have a one-on-one with President Biden and Prime Minister Kishida as well. They'll also have a luncheon, so that's going to give them around 6 hours together, giving them plenty of time to build an even stronger rapport for future cooperation. The summit is also symbolic, as it's the first time in 15 years that a South Korean leader has visited the iconic presidential resort, and also President Biden's first time ever hosting world leaders at Camp David. So it's a hugely significant event on various fronts and will definitely make for great optics.
Yes, absolutely. And what are some of the major outcomes that we can expect?
Well, officials in both Seoul and Washington have said that there will be ambitious initiatives to not only ramp up trilateral cooperation, but to institutionalize it by establishing a mechanism and various implementation measures as well. Now, this comes as the three countries face not only a growing nuclear and missile threat from North Korea, but also increased tensions in the South China Sea, rapidly evolving technologies and cyber threats as well. So, to address all of these, we've learned that there will be 3 major documents coming out of this summit. A UN official told reporters that the three sides have agreed on a third document called the Commitment to Consult. Now, this is going to be a political pledge that the three countries will jointly address a wide variety of security threats, not limited to North Korean provocations, trade disputes and cyber issues, by sharing information and discussing how to respond. Now, the 2 other documents we've previously heard about are the Camp David Principles, something of a vision statement between the three countries on strengthening cooperation and how they see various global issues, as well as the other document, which is the Spirit of Camp David. This would be a joint statement that establishes a trilateral consultative body along with initiatives to implement cooperation on extended deterrence, combined military exercises, and economic security. Now, the devil is in the details, of course. The measures could include a regular annual joint military drill, possibly including missile interception training, as well as cyber defense and a real-time missile warning system. A crisis hotline between the three countries' leaders have also been talked about in media, so that seems to be a possibility. Now, on the economic front, the summit could produce measures to increase supply chain cooperation, particularly on sensitive technologies and rare materials related to semiconductors, possibly with an early warning system between the three countries. Now, we're going to hear more, of course, at the joint press conference later this afternoon in the US. So we'll really have to see what the measures are and whether they will truly make diplomatic history in the 21st century, as the officials have claimed they will. Back to you, Chiang.
Thank you, Soo-young, for that. We'll look forward to hearing from you more about it later. And the leaders look to deal with supply chain disruptions centered around chips and other high technology, as the three countries could possibly forge an early warning system. Our business correspondent, Shin Ah-young, tells us more.
From an economic perspective, the global supply chain has emerged as one of the key agenda items for the trilateral summit between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan. Regarding supply chain issues affecting high-tech industries, the three countries are expected to discuss specific ways to enhance cooperation, such as sharing related information and establishing so-called early warning systems. One expert says the summit could be an opportunity for South Korea to uncover alternative supply chains of rare earth metals.
Well, Korea is currently very dependent on China for rare earth, and there is some concern that perhaps China will use that as a tool against not only Korea but the United States. So I think the United States has to be more active in trying to provide alternate sources of these rare earths to Korea, so that Korea can become more independent from Chinese influence.
Measures for export controls against China are another potential key agenda item of the trilateral meeting. The U.S. prohibited the export of semiconductor production equipment to China, and Japan also joined in the chip restrictions against China. In the meantime, a one-year moratorium, which is set to expire in October, was applied to South Korean companies Samsung and SK Hynix, which are two South Korean chipmakers with factories in China.
The U.S. will likely continue to push Japan to join China chip curbs. South Korea could probably receive a similar request as well. The three leaders could come up with cooperative measures on chips taking into account Seoul's chip manufacturing skills, Tokyo's manufacturing equipment and materials, and Washington's design capabilities.
Meanwhile, according to an official from Seoul's presidential office, an issue regarding U.S. investment restrictions on China will not be addressed during the trilateral talks. About a week ago, U.S. President Joe Biden signed an executive order that will prohibit some U.S. investments in China's quantum computing, advanced semiconductors, and AI sectors, and require firms investing in other tech sectors to notify the government when such deals are being done. Instead, issues such as the leaking of sensitive data related to advanced technology could be discussed during the talks. Shin Ah-young, Arirang News.
As semiconductors and other high technology are likely to take center stage at Camp David, our Lee Si-hoo looked around one of South Korea's largest chip-making sites to see what fosters the nation's breakthrough innovations.
South Korea is a key producer of some of today's most advanced semiconductors, and here at SK Hynix is where core R&D and production take place. Welcome to the chipmakers' headquarters in the city of Icheon, about 60 kilometers southeast of Seoul, housing the world's largest memory chips production plant.
We develop and supply advanced products like the industry's highest 3-to-1 layer NAND flash product, which was recently unveiled. As for DRAMs, we're cooperating with the global big tech firms to come up with various applied products such as high-performance, high-capacity DDR5, mobile LPDDR, and high-bandwidth memory.
High-bandwidth memory used to power generative AI devices has revolutionized data processing by stacking and connecting multiple DRAM chips like a building. It's also taken South Korean chipmakers to new heights amid the growing demand for next-generation semiconductor products that support AI technology.
We developed the world's first generation HBM product back in 2013, and we've been leading the market since, developing and certifying next generation products. With the market expected to grow drastically in years to come, I think that HBM will play an important role in our business.
And with discussions on technological cooperation between South Korea, the U.S., and Japan expected at the trilateral summit in Camp David, the ruling People Power Party lawmaker Song Seok-jun, who represents the city of Icheon, says he looks forward to such cooperation.
The U.S. has great strength in semiconductor design, Japan in materials, components, and equipment, and South Korea in the production of semiconductors that utilize such technology. With South Korea having leading firms such as SK hynix, I look forward to close trilateral cooperation in fostering talent, R&D, supply chains, investment, and incentives.
An expert in digital strategy echoes the need for such partnership.
It's very important to have a global cooperation to pursue the frontline technology of semiconductor business together. Semiconductor industry requires a tight cooperation in the supply chain to advance the economy and the technology.
Now all eyes are on the three countries' next steps forward and the influence they will have on the global semiconductor industry. 이시후, 아리랑 뉴스, 이천.
Eyes are also on to what extent Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo would discuss Taiwan or Ukraine issues at the meeting amid a rather tense relationship with Beijing and Moscow. Our Lee Dae-hyun tells us more.
As South Korea, the U.S., and Japan band closer together through the trilateral summit, where does China stand? Beijing has been opposing the summit, with Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin earlier this week saying that Beijing is against the country's patchwork of small circles that heightens confrontation. Chinese newspaper Global Times also claimed that the summit will trigger the new Cold War, adding that it harms the strategic security of other nations. However, Washington drew a line on this, with the State Department earlier on Tuesday saying that the summit should not be seen as provocative by China.
What this is about is deepening our partnership and collaboration on a number of areas that we believe are in the mutual shared interest of our three countries.
Now, the U.S. has been avoiding mentioning China when it comes to the trilateral summit. Citing an anonymous official, AFP reported that China will not likely be directly mentioned in the joint statement as Seoul refuses to show a firm stance towards Beijing. Although Beijing isn't best pleased about Seoul, Washington, and Tokyo's closer ties, China isn't showing clear actions on this matter. In fact, China rather started allowing group tours to South Korea last week. One expert says this may be due to China's current economic crisis.
This is somehow China's dilemma. Its economy is seeing a downturn, which means if it makes the wrong choice, that may have unwanted effects for Beijing. China's being cautious in its diplomacy right now.
He added that China may choose to strengthen its partnerships with North Korea and Russia following the summit. Meanwhile, there's interest over whether the three nations will discuss Taiwan or the war in Ukraine. Some experts say the result of this summit should expand on the Phnom Penh Declaration, where the three have reaffirmed the importance of maintaining peace and stability across the Taiwan Strait. Citing an anonymous government official, the Japanese newspaper Asahi Shimbun on Thursday said that it's likely that a joint document will include the opposition to the use of force to change the status quo, referring to Russia's invasion of Ukraine and China-Taiwan relations. Lee Dae-hyun, Arirang News.
The UN Security Council held its first open meeting on North Korea's human rights in 6 years. Though China and Russia argued this topic was inappropriate, they did not oppose convening the public meeting this time. Lee Seung-jae has more.
The UN Security Council on Thursday convened its first open meeting on human rights in North Korea in 6 years. China expressed opposition earlier in the week, saying that a council meeting on human rights in the DPRK falls outside the council's mandate, politicizes human rights issues and only serves to intensify confrontation and antagonism. The Chinese mission's spokesperson added that Beijing sees no added value for the Council to have such a meeting and will be against it. China's deputy ambassador to the United Nations on Thursday also criticized the meeting, saying that the main responsibility of the UN Security Council is to maintain international peace and security and not to discuss human rights issues of a specific country. He added that if the UNSC discusses human rights in North Korea, it will only lead to negative results, such as heightening tensions in the region. Russia also shared its opposition to the meeting, saying that raising human rights issues with North Korea is hypocrisy on the part of the United States and its allies, as North Koreans suffered because of international sanctions against the regime. Russia's ambassador to the UN also slammed South Korea, the US, and Japan for strengthening their military power in the East Asian region. In protest, North Korea took no part in the meeting. Pyongyang's Vice Foreign Minister Kim Sang-kyung called the meeting despicable and said it has nothing to do with the universal conception of human rights protection. However, the U.S. ambassador to the UN, Linda Thomas-Greenfield, argued that human rights issues are in fact linked to security issues.
We cannot have peace without human rights, and the DPRK is a case in point. This war machine, which stands in violation of multiple Security Council resolutions, is powered by repression and cruelty.
South Korea's ambassador to the UN, Hwang Jung-guk, also stressed the importance of human rights in North Korea, adding that such issues will ultimately endanger international peace and security as the regime uses resources that should be spent on the welfare of the people to develop nuclear weapons. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
The United Nations Security Council Sanctions Committee on North Korea has granted a sanctions exemption to allow the UN Children's Fund to carry out aid programs there. The committee announced the decision on its official website on Friday, saying that on July 28th, it approved the export to North Korea of items from UNICEF worth over $1.1 million. These include more than 400 items to deliver safe water supplies to communities and enable effective treatment at hospitals. Some of the IT equipment for the UNICEF Pyongyang office were included too. Radio Free Asia reports that this could be a sign that workers from international organizations are preparing to return back to Pyongyang. Flights from the North Korean capital Pyongyang to Vladivostok in Russia are scheduled to resume for the first time in more than 3 years. Russian news agency reported Friday that Air Koryo, North Korea's state-owned flag carrier, has flights into Vladivostok scheduled for August 25th and 28th. These will be the first flights on the route since 2020 owing to a COVID-19 forced suspension. No details about return flights have been released, but Russia's foreign ministry says that Air Koryo is charging $230 for the 1-hour 40-minute flight. China's property giant Evergrande files for bankruptcy protection in New York, leading to a deepening real estate crisis in the country. This on top of worsening economic woes with discouraging data coming out of Beijing. Our Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
China's property crisis continues to worsen, adding to a deepening economic slump. Evergrande, the world's most indebted property developer, on Thursday in a New York court filed for bankruptcy protection under Chapter 15 of the Bankruptcy Code. Chapter 15 not only provides mechanisms for dealing with insolvency cases that involve multiple nations, but it will also protect the company's U.S. assets while it tries to restructure its debts. Evergrande, along with a group of its offshore creditors, agreed to a debt restructuring plan in March. Evergrande has long been debt-ridden, defaulting on its debts in 2021 when it failed to meet interest payments on around $1.2 billion worth of international loans. The company, which was once China's biggest real estate firm, announced last month that it lost more than $81 billion in 2021 and 2022. This triggered a widespread property debt crisis, which dealt a severe blow to China's economy, as the real estate sector, directly and indirectly, accounts for around a third of its economic activities. It also makes up around 25% of the country's gross domestic product. China's real estate woes continue as last week another real estate giant, Country Garden, missed interest payments totaling $22.5 million that were due on August 6th. The nation's economy is already slowing as China reported earlier this month that exports dropped by more than 14% on year and imports more than 12% in July. Beijing also announced that consumer prices tumbled last month for the first time in over 2 years. If the current situation worsens, analysts say China is likely to miss this year's growth target of around 5% without additional stimulus measures. 이수진, 아리랑 뉴스.
Golf legend Park In-bi has been selected to represent South Korea in the election for the International Olympic Committee Athletes Commission. According to the Korean Sport and Olympic Committee on Friday, Park will be vying for one of the 4 available seats on the IOC Athletes Commission in an election that'll take place at the 2024 Paris Olympics. The IOC AC members serve a term of up to 8 years and act as a link between the athletes and the IOC. Park is one of South Korea's most decorated athletes with 21 LPGA Tour wins and a career Grand Slam by winning 4 different LPGA major championships. If elected, Park will become the 3rd person from South Korea to serve on the Athletes Commission. With more than half of the year 2023 already gone by, a lot has happened on the cultural front over the last 8 months. Now, as we get ready for the rest of the year, you might wonder what's next. Our culture correspondent Song Yu-jin has a preview of some of the big cultural events still to come.
With just a third of 2023 left, there's still a lot to be excited about in the world of culture, especially when it comes to performing arts. Clearly, there has been a lot to be excited about as well. The total ticket sales for the performing arts scene in Korea during the first half of this year grew over 40% from last year. The number of shows increased by 24%. Taking the lead are musicals, making up nearly half of the ticket sales and having the highest number of tickets sold. Korean audiences will be able to enjoy 3 of the big 4 musicals this year. Cats concluded its Korean tour in June, while The Phantom of the Opera, returning after a 13-year hiatus, moved to Seoul last month after a 3-month-long run in Busan. Marking the 10th anniversary of its Korean production, Les Miserables will make its return to Korean theater in October. Classical music commands the spotlight as well, which offered the most number of shows during the first half of the year. More than 10 overseas orchestras are scheduled to perform in Korea between October and November. They include the London Philharmonic, Vienna Philharmonic, Royal Concertgebouw Orchestra, Czech Philharmonic, and the Oslo Philharmonic. World-renowned pianist Cho Sung-jin will grace the stage alongside the Berlin Philharmonic and the Leipzig Gewandhaus Orchestra. Pianist Im Yoon-chan, winner of last year's Van Cliburn International Piano Competition, will play with the Munich Philharmonic. The world of pop music is buzzing with anticipation too, with big names following in the footsteps of Harry Styles and Bruno Mars. Singer-songwriters Charlie Puth and Sam Smith are set to perform in Korea as part of their Asia tours. And don't forget the big and small screens. Although summer's big film releases have wrapped up, it's too early to be disappointed. At least that's what one film critic told us.
2 Korean films screened at this year's Cannes International Film Festival, Cobweb and Sleep, are gearing up for their premieres. There's also Dr. John and Lost Talisman starring Kang Dong-won. On the streaming front, Netflix Sweet Home will be rolling out its 2nd season in the fall.
So, even as the year winds down, the cultural scene will stay vibrant, offering plenty of entertainment. Song Yu-jin, Arirang News.
Summer heat will persist throughout the weekend. Readings will be in the similar range tomorrow at 32 degrees Celsius for Seoul. But with high moisture levels in the air, sensible temperatures will be a couple degrees higher. Nighttime will be quite hot as well, with tropical nights prevailing. Drink plenty of water and avoid staying outside for too long. And for those across the south of the country, make sure to have your umbrellas handy tomorrow. For Jeollado and Gyeongsang-do provinces, 10 to 60 millimeters are expected. The coastlines of Gyeongsang-do province will see heavy downpours of up to 100 millimeters. Localized flooding is possible, so please be extra careful. Under overcast skies, Seoul will be starting off at 26 degrees Celsius. Maximum temperatures in Seoul will be hiking up to 32. Daejeon and Gwangju also 32. Daegu and Gyeongju will be topping out at 31 degrees. And for the time being, lows in the capital will stay 25 degrees or higher. Have a great weekend, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
That brings an end to this newscast. Thank you for watching. A special live coverage of the trilateral summit between South Korea, the U.S. and Japan at Camp David coming up in just a few hours. Until then, goodbye.
I'm live! 저를 도와주시는 분들이
저희와 함께 해주시는 세션분들
아무리 봐도 억지 텐션 같은데 아니라고 아무도 안 하는 거고